I've used this phone for 6 months, but there's one thing that nobody warned me about. It's not the battery, it's not the camera, and it's not the crease. Now the first thing you'll notice about this device is how thin and light it is, how it honestly feels just like any other flagship in terms of how portable it is. I mean, this is an iPhone from a couple of years ago, and the iPhone is definitely heavier, and if you look thickness wise, it's just about the same. This is obviously really impressive because you can unfold this and it becomes almost like a mini tablet in your pocket. That's something that hasn't been achievable in any of the previous generations of Galaxy Z Fold devices. So if we were to look at the actual benefits of this large screen, if we start off from websites in Chrome, there's a lot more information you can see on the one screen, which makes it act like a mini tablet. When we actually look at the specific articles, there's less benefit here because the amount of text is similar, but it is a lot larger and there is slightly more text on the screen. There's also the ability to switch between tabs more easily, which also makes it better for multitasking. So those are a few of the benefits. Then in terms of actually watching content, there is a less significant benefit because of the large black bars. And so you do get a large screen to watch content, but it's not that much bigger than a standard flagship phone. So that's something worth bearing in mind. Then if you were to want to do sort of multitasking on the device, it's a bit easier. The OS is obviously set up for that, and so it's a bit easier to do those things when you effectively have enough space for two apps to go on at the same time. Now, in terms of the quality of the actual screen, it's really good in terms of brightness, how vibrant it is. It's a very high quality OLED panel. Now, some of the issues you may have is the reflections. Unfortunately, being a foldable display, there's a lot more reflections. And then the other issue is the crease. Now, it's not always obvious. However, when you do have light shining at the screen, that's when you do notice it a bit more. So it's something worth bearing in mind. Now, how do I think most people are going to use this phone most of the time? And it might surprise you to say it'll probably be with the inner screen. Most of the tasks you do on the phone, whether it's messaging people, quickly opening and checking your notifications, that's all done in this inner screen. It's only really when you want to watch content or properly use your phone to look at websites, multitask, that's when you'll think about opening it up. And it's worth bearing in mind, since you do use this phone mostly in its folded form, there are some compromises that you have to think about. And if you're only using the inner screen some of the time, is it really worth it? Now, if we start by talking about some of the limitations of this device. Now, the camera is one that we can get started with. The camera is simply not as good as, for example, the flagship camera on the Galaxy S25 Ultra, well now the S26 Ultra that's recently released. We only go up to a 3x zoom on this camera, and in addition to it, the quality is not as good as what you'll get from the standard S25 Ultra. They had to thin the camera modules in order for it to fit in this thin device. It's worth bearing in mind simply how thin this device is. So in order to fit the camera module, they had to obviously have some limitations in terms of its performance. And we can have a look at some of the camera quality tests from what I've taken, and you can still get quite impressive results from this camera. So I don't think it's a reason not to buy the phone, but if you are someone who wants the best of the best in terms of camera quality and also video quality, then you'll probably have to go towards a flagship. And I think this camera quality difference is most notable at night, and also if you're zooming in. That's the cameras that are missing on this phone, unfortunately. Now, how would I say the battery life on this phone is? Now, I'd say on average, whilst you're at home, you'd probably get somewhere around 6 to 7 hours of battery life. However, if you're going out and using, mobile internet, that's when you'll get probably close to 5 to 6 hours, which is what I'd consider acceptable. But when you have a device like this that works as a tablet, you'd want to have the best battery life. unfortunately, there's just the limitations of how thin this device is. I don't think they could fit a bigger battery unless they went with the technology of that is in most Chinese phones, but that comes with its limitations in terms of battery durability. Now, it's worth considering with this inner screen, it's a bit more narrow than the typical phone screen, and that has some limitations. So for example, if you were to use Instagram looking at reels, there's just less space in these black bars, which mean the video isn't as big. The other thing is you might find typing initially a bit difficult, but I would say if you switch to the Google keyboard, that fixed my issues, because I made a lot of mistakes with the Samsung keyboard, but it fixed when you had the Google keyboard. Now, if we actually look at the durability of this phone, now it does have water resistance, but not dust resistance. So it doesn't live up to what most flagships are, resistant to. And I think most of it is due to this hinge, which unfortunately would possibly get damaged from the dust. Now, the other issue I've had in terms of durability is this inner screen scratched very easily. And that's only because of this case I've put on. So this is a Spigen case, which is actually quite expensive, £50. And unfortunately, due to the mechanism of it protecting the device, it's left a sort of a quite significant scratch mark. So I would recommend, if you do put on a case like this, to get a screen protector first. The other thing to consider is this inner screen does scratch quite easily, because it's a weaker, it's got a screen protector on it. So this screen protector can be replaced by Samsung for not that much money, maybe about £20, but it's another thing worth considering. These devices are more fragile than the standard flagship counterparts. Now, this phone is all good and well, but then you have the one big issue with all of it, and that simply comes down to app optimization. A lot of apps aren't optimized to take advantage of this bigger screen. If we take, for example, an Instagram video, the Instagram video is so much smaller than the device's full size. You'll also get different compatibility issues when switching between the folded and the unfolded form, where things aren't properly arranged on the screen. And I think, unfortunately, that's one of the biggest flaws of this device. The other issue is how small the screen is on the large screen because of the black bars. It means you don't actually get the full advantage of the larger screen. And so, unfortunately, this phone does have a big disadvantage, and it's due to the app optimization. Now, the hope is obviously this will be something that gets worked on over time, and a lot of the apps are actually quite good. If you take, for example, Auto Trader, it's not an app that I expected to be optimized, but it is actually, and it shows you a lot more content than you would see on a normal phone. But there's plenty of other apps such as TikTok, Instagram that aren't fully optimized and sometimes have issues. So it's definitely worth bearing in mind if you're thinking of getting this phone, about which apps you're actually going to use and will they take advantage of the big screen. And I think that's something that may improve with the iPhone Fold, since the iPhone and Apple will, lead a lot more app developers to optimize their apps for both the unfolded and folded forms. Now, here's my conclusion about this device. I think it's a really good phone. It achieves so much for a foldable device. These foldable devices, when they first came out, were really flawed. They had really small, narrow screens. They were really thick, and they weren't the most durable. Just tearing off the screen protector would cause the device to fail. So Samsung has come a long way, and we've got to the point where now this device, it feels better than actually a normal device in terms of holding it in your hand, because it's more narrow, it's more comfortable. And then you obviously have the option of opening it up and getting the tablet experience, which I think makes it a really good device. So who's this device for? I think this device is for anyone who's going to benefit from the larger screen, and that's a subset of people, because it's only going to be those who are watching a lot of content, ideally in 16:9 or higher. If it's 18:9, that's when it's actually not that beneficial to have the larger screen. And the other people are those who are productive, those who are multitasking on this phone and, using emails, web browsing, switching between tabs, this phone is definitely better than the rest in terms of that. Would I buy it again? I think that I actually would, mainly because it's so innovative, this phone, in terms of how portable, thin and light it is, how much better it was than the previous generation, and how much it adds with the largest screen. For me, there are a few compromises. The camera does have its flaws. The battery life isn't as good as you'd like for a device like this, and not all the apps are optimized. So you might be someone who would like to wait till these devices are even more polished than they are now. But for me, I think this is a really good device, and I would definitely go for it. The only thing worth considering is the price, of course. Now in the UK it starts at £1,800, and in dollars it's actually a similar amount, $1,800 to $1,900. The thing is, with Samsung you get a lot of discounts, and for example with this phone I managed to get it for about £950 quite early too when it launched. So if you're going to get this device, definitely don't pay full price for it. Get the cashback deals, get the trade-in deals, and then you've got a device for around about $900 to $1,000 to £900 to £1,000, and it will be one of the best devices you can get for the money. So yeah, thank you guys for watching my video. Please like, comment and subscribe to keep in the loop for more videos. Thank you for watching.